Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. Today is another special episode where I'll be interviewing one of my dear friends, Karl. Karl and I played together in my very first RPG campaign, and we have been friends for a very long time. He knows quite a bit about many different RPG systems, and I think you'll enjoy listening to the interview we had together. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Hey, Karl, my evil friend. How's it going, buddy?
Eddie, long time, long time. It's been far too long since we've terrorized the old world. Improved it in our image. um,
I think Eddie left the world a better place when he passed.
Eddie leaving the world was probably the safest bet at that point too. Things were probably going to get a little grim.
Yes, referring to that past campaign of ours. But we'll get into that a little bit later. I want to start off by asking, please tell me about your first experience in RPGs, because I know it wasn't that campaign that we're referring to, and it started off a little bit earlier for you than me.
Yeah, no. That actually, I always forget that a lot of people in that campaign were starting for the first time. Because a mutual friend of ours had introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons back in elementary school. Gosh, I forget the grade. Probably grade three, grade four. I don't know. Does not
Oh,
matter.
geez.
Yeah, and his his older brother ran a one shot for me and him, just with like these cards that would prefab a dungeon and all that, so he didn't have to have anything planned. And of course, like a lot of new players, I had it in my head that you have to be the holy warrior of good and light and shining and caringness and altruism. And as we're aware, I've diverged off that path since then. So my first character was Orlinde, and I just used my last name backwards to give himself a last name because I'm super creative and original. And
Hey,
yeah,
I
he was
wouldn't have thought to do that, so good
yeah,
on you.
he was a human paladin in 3.5. Actually, I think we were playing third edition at the time,
Okay.
and I wanted to be like the truly altruistic. So instead of taking one of these shining gods of war and valor and all that, he worshipped the goddess of halflings and the harvest. Because he grew up looking after the wee folk, which is something that Karl and Erlinde had in common, I guess. um, Close camaraderie with those that were about thigh high. And I love that character so much that when our friend's brother started a campaign, I essentially just remade Orlinde with a little more spice. Um, and he was not a, looking back at it, you could tell that I didn't really have experience with RPGs at all because he was not an objectively powerful character. I put
Right.
in my free feats to get an exotic weapon proficiency for a spiked chain. I found out about a year into the campaign that that was a complete waste of resources, but I loved it anyways. I kept on spending all my money on flasks of acid, not because they had any in-game valuable purpose for me or that my build would require it, but I just thought it was a fun item that would be fun to use and all that. And I try to hold on to a little bit of that wonder in it. Also, it was fun to stand out a little bit because that first campaign fluctuated between 7 to 11 players, which I don't reckon. That's far too many. Far too. You know
Yeah.
what? If you enjoy it, that's great for you. Awesome. And we had a lot of fun because we didn't know any better. But you definitely get a little distracted building dice towers and stuff when it's still going to be another 45 minutes before your turn again.
Yeah, no
But
kidding.
yeah,
Jeez,
we were
like I've
young and
done 8 players, but
well,
11?
eight,
Holy.
eight is toxic.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
But we were all young and we didn't have any responsibilities, so we could just do marathon sessions. Like it wasn't. I think our short sessions were 6 hours, and the long ones would go to about 10. And
Yeah.
we had going on. It was just like, hey, that's your Saturday now, and hey, actually, are you guys free Sunday? Let's do it again. The DM also like if people couldn't show up, it didn't matter. So like he just kept on running with the punches. So if your character was there, you were there, and it was awesome. And we just kept on going with our numbers, and it fluctuated a lot. Um, One problem with my first character though is I guess like session zero. I don't know if you guys have talked about it in your podcast before. Just going
Not
over like
not overly,
expectations.
but we can go on it right now. Yeah.
Very briefly. Like I was under the impression because my only experience had been that one shot that we were going to be again like the Final Fantasy holy warriors of light. We're going to save the world and be brave and bold. Turns out the party was brave and bold for fame and gold, not for honor and duty. And I was the only. There some claimed to be good in our party, but they weren't. Let's just say they weren't activist good. They were passive and in the background good, and
Mm.
it led to a lot of discord between Orlinde and the rest of the group, which the DM did his best to navigate, but it became problematic here and there. He was the least liked member of the party, despite being our healer and always there to help everyone. And I don't care that you just. I mean, I do care you murdered the guy, but I'm going to make sure you don't die because of it. Like you're an idiot. You can repent. And I think there's over the course of his character arc, Orlinde became a little disenfranchised with the idea of people repenting and atoning because his closest companions kept on abusing it, and it would turn into a little bit of what do you call them, the flagellants or whatnot. Except for instead of whipping himself, he'd use a spike chain on Bulby. I told you you have to stop stealing from people. That's not okay. That's 3 hits from the
Wow.
chain, and I'd heal him up afterwards because he served his penance by bleeding it. It
Talk
was
about becoming jaded. Holy.
and this was over the course of, I think this was about 3 years into the campaign or so. Actually, it was recently before he died at a session that I was not at. Some dire werewolf. I'm not even quite sure. Um, Torn in half on a critical hit, and you know what? I think that's the way Orlinde would have wanted to go. Getting away from those dastardly companions once and for all.
As he's
But
being ripped in half by the wolf, he's just saying, finally release.
yeah, I bring him back now and again as an NPC, but he was a really fun character, and I think it was mainly because, especially at that young age, it's kind of how you envision heroes.
Mhm.
They're just objectively good. They do what's best, and at least that's how I saw it at the time. And then you get a more nuanced understanding of good and evil and altruism and individualism, and as the time goes, and I think my characters over time started reflecting that.
That's fair. So how old were you when you played that campaign? Because you said it went on for 3 years.
Well, if I started, let's say I started in grade four, because let's say I didn't start it right away when we moved. So I would have been like 9 years old, something like that, nine,
Oh
10 years
wow.
old. And
Yeah.
then we played that campaign off and on until our buddy's brother went to university about 3 hours away, and that's when I donned the mantle of DM because we didn't have one, and I was the one
Ah.
who was willing to read the book.
Yes, no one ever wants to read those books.
You know what? It's probably the best and worst thing that ever happened because as much as I missed being a player for probably about a decade after that, it was so much fun and we have so many memories from it. But I know I got through. I only played two characters throughout that whole time, Orlinde, and then I brought in a bard afterwards. That was a lot more. Instead of playing what I wanted to play, I think I was overcorrecting to being something that would support and be good with the group, which I wouldn't totally suggest. But at the time, again, I didn't really have the experience on it. And a lot of the other players were a bit older than me, and I kind of looked up to them. And I didn't want to be
Right.
fighting them every session anymore. But it was still a really fun time. And Kyrie Vetra was there to chronicle the narrative of these heroes as we went around. And if they did
Yes.
something ludicrous and dastardly, well, that was just better for the plot line.
I mean, that's always a fun bard to play, the one that's just the note taker being like, this is going to be a great book when I'm done.
Exactly. And it was a really fun role playing opportunity because I think with Orlinde, I was doing things because it was an archetype. But with Kyrie, I would do things that were very circumstantial or situational, like 3.5. I think you were on your conversation with MacBeth, you got into it being a crunchy toolbox. If
Yeah.
where in like 3.5, there was a rule for everything. You want a
Yeah.
longsword? Cool. You want a serrated longsword? There was probably rules for it. You want a serrated longsword that has a blunt bit at the tip? Yeah, no, that's a different weapon. Meanwhile, in fifth edition, you just buy a longsword and you can flavor it whatever you want, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, which I mean, I like the streamlinedness of fifth edition, but there's some twisted little part of me that loved going into the deep think bank there and being like, okay, but if I take this weapon instead and I take that elf variant, yeah, no, not the snow elf from that book, but the snow elf from that other book, and
Yes.
it gets a little out of hand sometimes, but it was always just so much fun because no matter what you were envisioning, there was a rule for it.
Yeah.
And that's because homebrew and splat books have been out for so long that it had everything, which was kind of glorious.
So
Um,
that 3-year campaign, it was 3.5, not 3 that you started with?
we started with 3 and we emerged into 3 point. The majority of it was 3.5. It was only about 3 years with Orlinde, and then it was another, I don't even know how many years with Kyrie. Although
Oh, okay.
as we got older, we stopped playing every weekend. It was more like every
Right.
second weekend or twice a month, and it would be maybe back-to-back sessions or something.
Gotcha.
And that was
Okay.
also as the group grew, because it was originally 5 or 6 people, but for the majority of the campaign, it was we were poking double digits. Um,
So your character
but
was there for 3 years, but the campaign went on for how many years? Like 7 or 8 or something?
so let's say 7, something like it, give or take a year.
Wow.
Let's call it 7. We played a lot more in the first 3 years.
Yeah.
I'd say the first 4 we played a lot more regularly, and then it petered off a lot in the last bit there. But then yeah, I played the bard, and she became a half, or I guess she always was in the background, but her draconic heritage came out, and it was a silver dragon. And at that point, I had had a pound of tobacco because I presumed wrongly, being a new player, that you had to spend all your starting money. Like that was money to be spent. You couldn't just have it on you. So I
Yeah.
was the character who bought like 5 pounds of tobacco. I had bought a mule. I had a pet dog.
Yeah.
I had chickens for the party, but I wouldn't let us eat the chickens because we needed the eggs. And
Right. Yes. Continual food.
it was the whole thing. But I remember being it had been like 2 sessions or something after my draconic heritage had revealed itself, and silver dragons are all cold themed. I had resistance to cold. I had a cold breath weapon. My skin got a little glimmery shine that would probably cost a fortune at Sephora to be able to purchase now. And and then I realized there while we were waiting for our rogue to pick a trap or something like that, and I'm like, I can't, I don't want to smoke this anymore. It hurts my lungs to breathe in the heated smoke from my tobacco. And I started, negotiating with the people around my party. I'm like, so, I mean, you're obviously not going to pay me for it, but what would you trade me for my tobacco? And that's when I realized you didn't have to really be doing archetypes to role play. Like the small mundane moments were really fun.
Yeah.
And, it helped fill in the gaps when, again, I had nothing to do with picking locks or searching traps. That was those 3 players over there dealing with the DM. The rest of us were sitting around and just we had to keep ourselves entertained, and it was a lot of fun. But I think without going on too much of a tangent, as much as I do love the Crunch Toolbox of 3.5, there's also the further danger of it where, especially if you have newer players, I think 5th edition's much more accessible, not just for all
Oh,
the
yeah.
weird interacting rules, but also just on people enjoying it. Because I think a good player character, like, you're going to have fun and you're not ruining anyone else's fun. You have no
Hmm.
responsibility for your character to make other people have more fun. I think that's a benefit. But as long as you're having fun with your character and you're not impeding someone else's, I think that's a win. And I remember what Esteban ran a campaign once, and a one
Yes.
shot, and it had been so long since I had played, and I was so excited, and I wanted to pull out my toolbox, and it was 3.5 again, and of course I had this archive of like 30 characters that had been sitting there forever, and I didn't touch any of them.
Right.
Is I made gosh, what was it? A half demon, no, a half dragon, half elf product of infernal dalliance, which is a feat you could take, which effectively meant one of your parents that had intercourse with a demon or a devil. And
Oh,
so I had
well
scorpion
then.
claws instead of hands. I had a scorpion tail that had this insane poison damage. I was a bad guy out of like an anti-hero video game type thing. Think early 2000s.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Darksiders without like the Christian theme. It was it was I was what went bump in the night. But it was just short enough that we didn't really do alignments, so that wasn't really an issue at the time for us there. But also the 2 people I was playing with, there was an elf ranger and I think a dwarf fighter, and then
Hmm.
there's me with just to describe my character was a paragraph and a half, not from characteristics or anything, but I'm like, well, I took this template and I dipped into this class and I did this and that feat interacts with this skill, and oh, but I took the homebrew version of this. And I think
Yeah.
I realized there where like my fun was kind of impeding into someone else's, and that became I don't think I realized it until about halfway through the session. But that became important to me moving forward when making a character of, yeah, sure, it's great if I can have fun with it, but I shouldn't rain on someone else's parade, right? And
Yeah, you don't want to be sucking up all the airtime, as it were, when it
yeah,
comes to the campaign, right? You want to make sure everyone gets equal play and is able to have their moments of fun, even if their character isn't fully optimized, which you can totally do in 3.5, but it does
yeah,
leave a lot of newbies in the dust who are like, I just wanted to be a dwarf. I just wanted to be a halfling.
exactly
I didn't
right.
know I
And
could
it
be a
wasn't
scorpion person.
exactly. And look, even people who had been playing for as long as I had, and like I don't compared to a lot of people we played with, I played for a while, but like I don't think of myself as a longtime player because again, our buddy's parents have been playing since, as his fridge magnet says, before D&D was cool. Um, and he's like first edition and AD&D and all that, the red
Hmm,
box.
hmm.
But I think at that point I realized like there's nothing wrong with being a purely flavor character that's totally incompetent. There's nothing wrong with being a total minimaxer, totally optimized. I like to have a niche where I'll impose limitations on myself, and whether that's just being like, I'm a wizard, but I refuse. I'm going to use thunder and lightning spells only. And like, yeah, sure, I could take fireball. Everybody loves fireball,
Yeah,
but I'm not going
classic.
to. If it doesn't fit into the like the thunder, lightning, even maybe just like a speed vibe, so I can take haste, but I won't take slow. Um, it's I found it was much more rewarding for me to make a highly tuned character doing that, and by
Mhm.
having flaws or limitations, it almost invited more role play because it wasn't like I'm a wizard, I can do all these amazing things. It's I'm a this type of wizard. I do this one thing really well. Oh no, you want to be able to fly? No, sorry, that's not my craft. That's someone else. You want me to be able to rain meteors down on enemies? You want me to charm people? I'm a book nerd. I don't have the riz.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not in
but
my toolbox of skills there.
exactly right, and just being able to limit like that, or playing characters that are counter archetype. Like I'm playing a character now for fifth edition, Hobson, affectionately called Doc Hops by the party members. He's a rogue, which is supposed to be a DPS. Like I'm supposed to be sneaking in the shadows, stabbing in the back, getting those kills and all that. I put everything into medicine, and my DM let me use a custom doctor background, and I used
Oh
my
my
bonus
gosh.
action. I used my bonus action as a thief to use medicine kits to heal people in combat. And I got like this, no rogues or ever have a happy backstory. That's not a rule. That's just a trope. Um,
Yeah.
so he's like he was a soldier before, soldier of fortune, a mercenary. He's never trained in medicine. But the beginning, I don't want you to get demonetized or whatnot. I don't know how that works with this, but
Don't worry about it.
the beginning is Saving Private Ryan, where they're storming the beaches and
Oh yeah, that
the
classic scene. Yep.
yeah, the
Yeah,
medics are
yeah.
running around and they're trying to patch someone up and they're shoving everything back inside and trying to stitch them up, and then a stray bullet hits them or a grenade or whatever. Just give
Yeah.
us a freaking chance. And that was my whole incentive for this character. So he'll fight monsters, but he won't fight humanoids. And whenever our paladin knocks down a bandit or something, I'm down there giving him CPR and sewing him back up because we don't
Oh my
kill
gosh.
people. That's not what we do. We're better than that. Um, so like it's annoying in a different way because like when I'm healing them, I'm saving the good healing for my team. I'm just gonna stabilize that guy, right? Because I don't want him to stand back up and stab our team
Yeah.
again. Um, and when our guys go down, I have the healer feat, so I can actually heal them with the medicine kit instead of just stabilizing them. And it's a lot of fun. And I've never played a non-magic healer before, especially in D&D, because it's not really made for that. Like Warhammer
Yeah.
maybe, but not a D&D. It's not an archetype. And
Yeah, but that's so much fun to play those kind of characters that aren't meant to be min-max. Like I've played a very
yeah,
similar sort of character, except it was a bard, and his whole thing was he was a pacifist, so he'd run around combat playing his saxophone, and it would just be like epic sax man, and he wouldn't
yes.
fight anything ever. He would just heal his friends. And it
See, I
got to the
love
point
that.
where the party was pissed off with me a lot of the time, just like, why aren't you helping?
It's like I
Like
am
this.
helping. It's called morale.
Yeah,
Like toot magic flute, you're doing your job better now.
exactly. Bardic inspiration.
Woo! And it's or even like my favorite type of wizard is the blade singer, which is like a melee
Mm.
focused. Like I love it when you take a class and you pull it outside of its, and it's probably because I've played most classes too many times, and like,
Right.
cool, I can be a druid and turn into a bear again. Awesome. Actually, that is awesome. Because I love bears and I love being able to shapeshift. So like, yeah, no, I'll do that again probably next campaign. But um, it's just nice to take a character out of the archetype, and
Yeah.
it gives your party a little bit more role playing opportunity too, because they're like, you're not just a trope now. They have something to engage with, and it's
Yeah.
I really enjoy that.
I did want to touch back just on the characters you said you started playing when you were a kid. You had these big like archetypal roles in mind, and that was your idea of role
Yeah.
playing as an early on kid when you're getting into these games. But then later on you kind of realized the fun of just having these improvised moments that are based off little character quirks. And I think like for me that was my favorite part about D&D was having those little improvised moments. And it's really fun to see people make characters where their whole thing is like, oh, I'm going to try and sell people snake oil or something like that. Oh, I'm going to
Yes.
rob every single person I see. And I just find like that makes a character so much more enjoyable than people that have, or not that it's bad to have a huge like archetype on your
Oh yeah,
character, but
no.
being able to have those little moments is what's going to make every session fun for you.
Or like Eddie always trying to cook us up something in between combats, and sometimes during combat, because life on the ship got hairy now and again. It's just always a lot of fun to have something that just makes your character a little more unique. I don't know, maybe that's the millennial snowflake in me coming out there, but I want to be
Yeah.
special.
Well,
Yeah, no,
For
it's
Eddie, it was he was kidnapped, right? And his trade was baking.
hey, it's not kidnapping, it's indentured servitude.
Right. Yeah. Which he just escaped by the skin of his teeth before that character went off
Oh
into the
gosh.
forest and died by wolves.
Hey, Orlinde died from wolves too. Our first character, or a wolf at least, our first
Yeah.
characters died in a similar fashion. Orlinde never had to travel swimming though, so I don't think we had that relatable.
Oh, swimming in Warhammer is so difficult.
It's worse than any fight you'll ever maybe met with bar fights, but bar fights are probably the second most lethal thing after swim checks.
So in
But
my in the current campaign I run, one of my players I met from the campaign I did previously with MacBeth. So we were
yeah,
playing Warhammer before that, fourth edition. And I
yeah.
remember the first time in my campaign it came to a swim check, and he looked at me and said, "Oh no." And I'm like, "Don't worry, we're in fifth edition. Swimming is easy."
No, it was actually the last time I played with MacBeth. Um, the I was about to say something really nasty about him. The creative and wonderful dungeon master that he is made me do swim checks again, and at least I was a strong character, and I could have. And Skag knew the dwarf didn't have the issue that Karl had, but
Yeah.
it was traumatizing. I didn't expect the PTSD to come back to me quite so quickly.
We should do like a low key prank on Macbeth where we just say, "Oh, next time we're all together, we need to do a Warhammer one shot, and you gotta DM it, and then we'll just all build characters that have like 50 in strength, be like, dare us to do a swim check, see
I'll
what
make a
happens."
I'll make a priest of Manan, and then I think you can get water breathing pretty early on.
Yeah.
And the one guy that can't swim, oh great Manan, devourer of ships and lover of sharks, don't let my friend die.
Yeah,
Oh,
because you know he can't resist putting us on a sailboat.
it, it's I would say it's become a trope at this point, but I think when you're so skillful with narrative as he is,
Yeah.
it never feels stale. He always keeps it
No.
fresh. The only stale part is the traumatic emotions that bubble back up in me.
I mean, one of my favorite parts about that first campaign that I played in, where you were Karl and I was Eddie, was the whole ship journey of it, because that was a lot of our travel between place to place. We were going on these long, wide rivers, I think, that connect all the different towns.
You
Is
mean that ship?
wait, wait, hang on. Take it out. Okay.
Oh,
Is that like an old drawing from back in the day?
this is my Karl, quote unquote,
Oh my
Azantine
gosh.
folder.
Oh my
I don't
gosh.
keep all my characters, but the ones that I've realized over the years, the really cool builds, whatever, I can always remake those. Like Product of Infernal Dalliance, I don't remember his name, I don't remember his personality. All I remember is that I took a bunch of feats together and jibbled it up.
Hmm.
The really flat characters, like I made a rogue once who had like a because we were rolling for stats. I think he had a 4 constitution. He had
Right.
never been adventuring before. He was a sickly kid. That was kind of fun, but he didn't really have a niche to go into. The ones where I understand the ideology, the drives, the flaws, the personality of my character, I have all of them still. I've got Orlinde, although he was kind of two-dimensional. I've got Karl. It's I don't know. I've got Eladrin. He was a blade singer. He was a human though, and his whole thing. And I told the DM right out the get-go, look, he thinks that this is possible. As a player, I'm not expecting you to give me this. You know what? It's almost better if you never do give us this. He wants to seek immortality because he was adopted by elves and he just wants to live with his family forever.
Right.
And so he's going around and he shaves. Like I put all my money into a masterwork shaving kit, and so he shaves every morning religiously as he prepares his spells. And just little, if you when you find out what makes your character tick and what like you're almost not even role playing anymore. You're kind of stepping into shoes. And the ones, if I get to play that for long enough, I've got a whole bunch of file folders underneath my desk here. I've started going electronic, but it doesn't quite feel the same.
So I'd warn you about that because in the last campaign I did with MacBeth before he moved away, I had 5 characters and I loved all these characters. I had decent backgrounds for them. And the only reason I had so many was because they kept dying. Not my fault. Just, it's just what
No,
happens.
it
But
couldn't be your fault. No way.
but the sad thing is I had all these characters saved and I had notes on them, and then that laptop got stolen. So just make sure you keep backup hard drives in other locations when you go digital is what I'll say.
I store all of my RPG materials on Google Drive, whether I'm
Mm,
DM, player character, either way.
yeah,
Mainly because issues like my laptop being 70% reconstructed on the table behind me right now. The
that's
fan was
fair.
overheating. I don't know what I'm doing with it. I think I know where all the parts go back in, but I don't know how to put them back in, and I don't know what they're called, so I don't know what to Google. So, but that's neither here nor there.
Take pictures, ask people on Reddit, what's this called? Where'd it go?
That's literally what I'm doing. And some people are very helpful and some people are very toxic, but that's the internet.
I mean, just ignore the toxic people and just take the helpful advice.
exactly. Exactly.
Oh my
But
gosh. Yeah.
yeah.
No, keeping character notes is so much fun. I wish I started doing that earlier on. Like I never
Yeah.
took notes in that campaign that MacBeth did, and I regret it because I remember random bits of things, but I don't remember the entire continuity. Like I remember what happened when we were in Marienburg and half the city burned down. I remember Esteban being in a long series of fights with underground gangs, and then us remembering that he was still holding the teacup. Do you
Yes.
remember that?
The teacup. Oh my gosh. He was the most civilized ruffian that we ever met. And I freaking loved it. No, like
There's
this
that
was the
one session
list.
where you challenge someone to a duel by slapping them across the face with a glove.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And in Bretonia of all places, I'm like, dude, that's dangerous. Like also that was in all of his infinite wisdom, it was fairly karmic. MacBeth had sapped my magic at that point, so I'm like, I would love to help you. I'm not above cheating and murdering this guy. I know you don't want me to, but I don't want you to die. But I
Oh yeah.
can't because I'm basically a buff peasant with a sword because my magic's all wonky right now. And
What did MacBeth do to your magic? I don't know if I knew about that.
this was around the time of the Devil's Dance Floor with the cannonballs and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
my magic characteristic, which had been maxed out at 4, which again, very game broken. It wouldn't have been out of the realm of fairness for him to ask me to retire the character at that point. But instead, and very much, it was very in the narrative, in the arc, which is a testament to how good he is with weaving these plots. He drained my magic, and I didn't know if it was temporary. I didn't know if it was permanent. A different wizard had, I don't know if it was his magic, an artifact. I never caught up to him because I was,
Yeah.
drowning because it led to a swim check. And so this powerful necromancer, demonologist, chaos wizard, chaos sorcerer, who had just contributed to flattening a city with undead hordes, was now totally without his tools. And it had been almost like an addiction to him, like for
Yeah.
him. Because well, once you've tasted this power, how could you ever go back to, like, instead of swinging a sword to cut somebody, I was using magical claws to rip through them and drink their blood. It was rather
Yes.
grim, but it was a whole thing. And it was a really interesting arc that he paired really well with is Karl's whole thing was faith and family. And up until that point, the two things hadn't conflicted yet. Because his found family, he had family up north far away, but his found family was the crew. And because I had been very subtle with introducing Karl's tendencies at first, nobody even knew he was a wizard until the second session. His wizards were very much controlled, and there's superstition around them, which is very much warranted. I wouldn't want to travel with a wizard in the old world. But when the ship was in danger and people were going to die, oh, boom, I blasted it with this magic blast. And people kind of looked past that I bit my knuckle open and, spewed blood at them, because they're like, oh my gosh, we needed a wizard. No way. And instead
how
of
convenient.
Yeah, how convenient. Oh, that's not a walking stick? You're carrying a sword. I thought you were a fighter. And because I went very much on the building relationships with different characters and explaining to them the teachings that I had learned from my belief system, instead of just being like, all hail Tzeentch, the changer of ways, the mutator of flesh, the bringer of doom. Instead, it was talking to our buddy Brandy and being like, hey, man, there's nothing wrong with, drinking and doing drugs and, finding yourself in a body house. No. And in fact, my people back home have this wonderful deity that's kind of all about that. It's almost, it's cherished as a divine aspect in religious activity. And, or going to Magnus at the time, he had retired shortly after I had joined, and being like, oh yeah, no, like, look, bloodlust, as long as you control it, is perfectly fine. I mean, you don't want to stab your friends, but if you go into a berserk rage while you're cutting apart the opposition, even if they're fleeing, that's not such a big thing. They dared to initiate the fight with you. You're not the bad guy. And I think that's a really important aspect of playing an evil character, is first, being nuanced. You're not just a cartoon villain trying to blow up the world, even though at his heart, Karl kind of was. And two, having a reason for being in the in-group. And whether or not you actually care about the in-group, just have your villain be smart enough that he realizes you need to rely on someone. And it can't just be through fear, because, fear works to an extent, but they're just going to leave you behind the first chance they get. And why wouldn't they?
Well, it's like a Machiavellian mindset, right? It's how can you use these people to get what you want and make sure they don't feel like they're being used.
100%. And Nietzsche and Machiavelli were two inspirations for Karl. And he thought himself more of an intellectual than he was, which I think MacBeth did a very good job of twisting on him time and again throughout the plot, where an actual intelligent character, an NPC, would spin a web or catch him in an inconsistency, and Karl wouldn't know what to do, because in his mind, he's the smartest, most virtuous person he knows. And all of a sudden, there's somebody playing 4D chess and he's playing checkers.
Right.
It was interesting. But I think the importance on family there, or it doesn't have to be family, but in-group connections, genuine relationship, was something that I think I messed up in a later character, because Karl was my first objectively evil character. Like, of course, he thought he was a good guy, but that was the first time that I'm like, I'm donning the villain cape as a player character. Let's do this. It's not me that I have like, oh, I've got a tragic backstory and I've got dark abilities like a warlock, but I'm actually a good guy. No, like, Karl would sacrifice babies and drink blood. Like, that wasn't a problem for him. I don't think we ever sacrificed babies. But we
just killed. I remember one time, I think you killed someone for the convenience of being them to get information when we were trying to tear apart Marienburg.
Oh, I almost forgot about that. Yes, because if you take, because if you took the visit, that was, oh gosh, I loved that. And that was a prime example there in Marienburg too, because Karl had gotten to a point where he's relying on his powers to solve everything, when really he should have just talked to his friend. Because Marienburg was the town where three of his oldest friends were. Three of his only friends other than the player characters, and two of them didn't trust the new paramour of the other one, and instead of going and talking to him and trying to just get to the bottom of it, whether the new paramour was problematic or not, Karl took it upon himself to know what was right, because he always knows what's right or wrong, even for his friends. And that came back to bite him, because that's polluted the well for his three friends, even the ones that wanted him to do something. and they came after him later, which he had his magic drained during that. So it was really lucky that he had the found family, the crew, to save him later. Because when we're in Bretonia and a wizard shows up with a bunch of knights, and I'm sitting there like, I can conjure a spark with my fingertips now. When I'm
Yeah.
used to rating death from above, it showed the importance of why you need those connections. But on the flip side, I played a Curse of Strahd. Okay, actually the second time I played Curse of Strahd, and we had the whole party had decided we're going to be evil. And again,
Okay.
it was a misunderstanding on the degree of evil. One of us was a murderous tree beast, like an ent type thing, and he just wanted to be like the chaotic evil, murder everything. Like we're going to besiege the town and massacre them all. And okay, well, like that's fun for 2 sessions.
Yeah, it can get really flat, especially when you go that chaotic evil route of just evil acts for the sake of being evil, which is pretty
Yeah,
much what chaotic evil is at the end of the day.
with yeah, with no goal, with no grander purpose.
Yeah.
And like that would have been fine if he had been willing to negotiate with or like cooperate with like I went the lawful evil route. I was playing an imp, and I would draw up contracts with like the local wizard apprentice and try to get him to change to a warlock instead of a wizard, and like all these things, or turn families against each other and stuff, which I guess probably wasn't fun for the evil tree guy because he had built this hulking death machine, and like social aspects were not his vibe. And then the third one was a warlock, this undead warlock guy, and he was supposed to be like I was originally his familiar, but he helped me escape hell. Here we are; it's a great time. Um, and he started going on this redemption story arc,
Oh,
and
okay.
that kind of led to those moments where players like, oh, but it's what my character would do, and you're like, well, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You're still being a dink. Like, don't do that.
It's
Um,
such a fine line sometimes too, where
yeah,
I've been in the situation where your character would do something and it's literally just diametrically opposed to what the party's goals are, and I just
yeah,
retire the character because
and
there's there's a point where you think, okay, well, if the character's goals are this, then they're not going to be with the party, so I need to move on and get a new guy.
exactly, why are these people still traveling with you? Like, what's
Yeah.
what's the reason? And I think that can happen to good characters or bad characters. Like, if you're the rogue
Yes.
that abandons your party in the middle of combat to loot a room that the DM has already heavily implied is empty, well, why did you abandon us when our life was on the line? Why am I going to risk my neck out for you? No. But for this, Mal Relayeth, shortened to Mal because again I'm super creative and my imp was bad. Um, we were I won't spoil anything for people who are still going to do Curse of Strahd. It did come out a while ago, but anyway, we were saving a holy corpse, and it was supposed to have importance to the church. And I turned to my warlock friend, and this house is burning, and we still have player characters inside and all that. And the warlock has the corpse or the bones or whatnot, and I cast friends on him, which again, it's something that I would avoid doing now, but the DM allowed is casting enchantment spells on your teammates. But
Mm,
our DM did allow persuasion checks on each other instead of having to in-game it, or instead of
yeah.
like not crunch it, instead of having to role play it. So I'm a sorcerer. I'm a high charisma character. I cast friends on him, and I say, "You save our companions. I'll deal with the bones." I'm not lying. I am going to deal with them. And because I'm an imp, I can turn invisible as soon as I have them. I fly outside of the city walls so he can't just chase me, and I burn the bones. And at the time, I thought very much in my mind, oh well, this is Mal acting out against his warlock buddy because you've been healing people, you've been going to church, like you're betraying, you're leaving me behind. And
Right. Yeah.
I didn't really take into consideration that okay, it's fine despite a character, but it's not fine despite a player. And I think that's what the balance that Karl did that I didn't have with Mal, and what made Mal kind of feel dirty. Like it wasn't with Karl, even if I did things that weren't good for the other characters, I hope at least that most of the players still had fun with him. And he did it in a way where he was never trying to target or subjugate a teammate.
Right.
Meanwhile, with Mal here, I basically looked my teammate in the eyes, and he knew exactly what I was going to do. And I say, I cast friends, so I've got advantage. Oh, you don't have a high charisma score. Yeah, I guess you're going to have to, natural roll a 20 against me here, and I've got advantage, and you don't. And it, it wasn't nice. And I think
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with playing an evil character, even in an objectively good campaign. But I think you have to walk that line between making sure that you're causing the harm either to characters, not players, or avoid that altogether and only target NPCs. Have some sort
Yeah.
of weakness for the party, even if you don't like them. Just maybe you owe them a life debt. I don't know. Maybe you want to use them in a ritual that's going to be like after the campaign, quote unquote. Have some purpose. You can justify it with whatever you want, right? Like
Mhm.
Bane and Batman had people around him. Yeah, sure, he killed a lot of them, but he never killed key members. They were important to him. He killed henchmen, and I think like Darth Vader with Admiral Krennic, like he kept Krennic around for so long. Why? Because Krennic served a purpose,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's going to be some Star Wars fans that are like, actually, he saved Krennic for longer because Lord Palpatine would have been really mad, and I'm like, look,
It's
okay, I'm
okay.
sorry.
Let's start a flame war and Star Wars nerds,
Yeah.
so that's fine.
Look, my favorite Star Wars character is Spock, and no, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Look, let's just get one thing clear. Han didn't shoot first, so
I can't get behind that. That's too evil even for me. See
leaves Karl.
That's Mal evil. That's not Carl evil. But yeah, no, I think that was and I didn't even think I realized that problem with Mal right at the get go because I played him until the end of that campaign, or at least until we got TPK'd by Baba Yaga. But
You repeated
I
yourself there, so
but yeah, no, I think after the fact, I think comparing the two because I thought he was a really interesting character, but I don't think it was he wasn't a player. He wasn't a team player, and I think if you're going to
mm,
be evil, be the evil like Moriarty, where you have a plan for people. Don't be just the frothing at the mouth berserk that you're more likely to eat your teammates' ear off than look out have their back.
yeah, it
Um,
is an interesting thing when you play a character because it can be good, neutral, evil, doesn't matter. You want to make sure that it's something you're going to have fun with, but everyone is going to have fun interacting with. Because if
exactly,
both
yeah.
those aren't there, you're not going to have a good time.
And I like to as I know you've had some conversations on alignment in the past too. I only really use good neutral evil to get quick conveyance of the vibe.
Yes.
I go by what I think that my favorite part about fifth edition is the bonds, ideals, flaws, and I take multiple of some of them sometimes. Like
Yeah.
I very rarely roll on them because I like to mix and match, and that's kind of where I get my 3.5 crunch in, even though it's not
Yeah.
stat wise. And then I pair that with hey, well, what were some formative moments in their life or whatever, right? It could be childhood, it could be been last week, whatever. And just like their viewpoint on the world is not only does it give you really fun role play and it gives you your ties to the group, but it also just makes it really easy that when the DM puts a spin on something like, hey, so you have this guy and he's not talking, the barbarian or the death priest wants to torture him. Are you okay with that? And like I've got my ideals and everything. I'm like, look, this makes me squeamish. I don't want to be in the room, but I'm an ends justify the means sort of guy. So I'm going to leave the room because I don't want to be a part of this. I don't condone it, but I don't care enough to stop it. Or if you're
Yeah.
like, no, this is a big deal for me. We have to find a different way to do this. I'd rather chop his head off than twist the knife. And
Yeah.
I think it gives you that firm stance so that you're more likely to stick to your role playing then instead of just doing whatever is I don't know economically viable in the moment. Is in the end, if you get caught up in what the team's doing, you might do something that is kind of out of pocket for you, and that doesn't really fit your character just because it's what the group wants to do. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm also a firm believer in sticking by what you set out for your character and then just also knowing when to balance that with the party. So I didn't know
100%.
if 3.5 had a similar thing. I know 4 didn't have anything like the backgrounds in 5th edition. And it's so nice because it does get the players just up on their feet when it comes to role playing, like you said about like saying who your character is, and
Yeah,
especially ideals, bonds, and flaws. I find those really tell you how you should interact more than your nebulous alignment will, because being
100%.
neutral evil or being neutral good is kind of really freaking vague at the end of the day.
Yeah, no,
But
and
you're sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna finish it by saying if but your bond or your flaw is going to tell you precisely potentially how you would interact in those situations that you laid out there.
100%. And I think too, if you have a specific ideology, you can put that down. But even like I'll pick And if you look up online, you could be like alternatives for alignment. And before backgrounds in fifth edition and stuff, because 3.5 didn't have those. They had templates and stuff, but it wasn't the same. What I would start doing is be like, okay, well, instead of good versus evil, are you an individualist or a collectivist?
Hmm.
Is like in a way, evil is just being selfish. It's not necessarily in this attunement of it, right? But like you could have a selfish hero as well. But it's less abstract, and you kind of have a spectrum to go on then. And you can find a bunch of these, right? Are you a traditionalist or are you progressive? Are you like you pick any sort of spectrum? The whole Aristotle thinking of virtue is the mean between two extremes type situation. You pick
Right.
two extremes and you decide where on the scale you lie, and that can change over the game. I think it should probably have a reason to change.
Hmm.
But like some of my favorite moments are when characters I bring them in one way, and by the end of the campaign, they're doing things that are totally different than they would have to come in with, just because experiences change you. Like maybe you were full of piss and vinegar, and you're like, oh, let's go kill the dragon for fame and glory, ha ha. And then the first fight you guys get into against a dire wolf, two of your buddies get ripped to shreds, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh crap, fame and glory isn't going to keep us alive. Like caution and cold steel is what's going to save us, and you can have a lot of fun with that. Yeah.
Well, it makes me think because like in Warhammer they have the system for getting what are they called that you get, but you get insanity points, and then eventually you can get
Yes.
these deep flaws in your character that come as a result of getting all this insanity, which is kind of like that idea, but just in one direction, right? It wouldn't go in the
Yeah.
other direction where if you have a bunch of successes, then you get this new virtuous ability to your character. But that'd be an
And
interesting thing to see in a system. I don't know if it's out there in some other obscure
I think
system that I just don't know.
some systems, and I know a lot of homebrew will have it, will be it'll either be social, so you'll have reputation. So if you do good
Yes.
things, you'll get better perks and boons. And then I've seen homebrew before where in games where kind of like where high fantasy magic it permeates everything. This is more like high divinity, where the gods are active players. They're not just watching their pawns move around the board. They're like, I'm moving this piece. And
Yeah.
in that one, the more you act within the ideals of your alignment or your, I don't know, your Magic the Gathering color pie, like whatever it is,
Right. Sure.
what,
Yeah.
what whatever team you have chosen, whatever faction belief, whatever you've internalized, the more you act in that, instead of getting, say, inspiration, you move up the steps in that arc. And then, yeah, no, if you are the holy good guy of good, maybe even as a non-magical character, you can lay on hands like a paladin, or you can
Right.
do these different things. You can sense evil and stuff like that. And I think that's a really cool concept. I don't think that works for all settings, but it definitely is something that I think it works really well. And then you're not just punishing. Although I do love Warhammer for that. The three colors of Warhammer: mud, blood, and bone. And it's I like games kind of like I don't know, blackjack, where you can do everything right and still lose. And
I
Warhammer
agree. Yes.
Warhammer screams that out, where you can make all the cautious plays. You have the best knit team. Everybody's looking out for each other. You've got all the all the roles covered, and it
And
just doesn't work.
just roll 99 every single
Yeah.
time.
And look, your rat catcher wanted to become a holy war priest of Ulrich or something, but he's a rat catcher. And when the goblin shoots him with an arrow, that's game over, buddy. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's a critical hit. Oh, your leg's broken in half.
Oh, it's a critical hit. You get hit. Oh, let me roll on the table to see where you get hit. Oh, it's a headshot. Okay, well, let's see what happens. I'm sorry, MacBeth. It knocks out your eye. um, and there's a stat penalty that goes along with that. He lost 5 to ballistic skill off that. And like
Oh yeah.
5% is a lot. That's
Yeah. Oh yeah, because
oh
that's
gosh.
second edition, eh?
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah,
Second
yeah, yeah.
edition
Yeah. So
was
so much more
brutal.
brutal.
I
Oh, that's
I
how what is it? His
Magdalene got her
character.
iPad.
That's how she got her eye patch. Okay, because that was before I joined the campaign.
Yeah, no, that was when I was still DMing, and it was interesting. You know me, I'm very big on home brewing creatures in D&D. Like my goblins in D&D are have no right to be as powerful as they are, because I like people to be scared of them. I like that you are a new adventurer. You're taking your life in
Mhm.
your hands every time you leave the city walls.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't realize how severe that was just out of the book with Warhammer. And I didn't change anything. I'm just like, hey, let's do these. There we go. but I'm a fly by the seat of your pants type of guy, right? So let's roll with the punches and let's find a narrative way to keep it going. And
I I think I think Macbeth referred to this conflict in the conversation we
oh
had because he did say something about how there was a how there was an encounter that was too overpowered, but the DM just rolled with it, and I thought, yeah, that
yeah,
sounds like what
and
Karl
look,
would do.
but that's why you have fate points.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you got
And
three of them. Come on.
yeah,
I mean,
and
maybe
look,
two.
that set the tone there. Like I would have felt worse if we had been like weeks into it and people had been like, this is the final boss fight and I just made it impossible. This was a throwaway encounter. Like this was these guys had picked up their first quest to make a little cash. And okay, yeah, and you know what? They went barging head on into a greenskin nest. So the goblins are there. There's a couple orcs coming. The encounter was supposed to have orcs in the original encounter. I decided they were off hunting and that you had a certain amount of turns to flee the encounter before the orcs got back. It would have been a lot worse. But this was three goblins in the forest. This wasn't an army. And but I came from D&D, right? Three goblins. First level adventurers can handle that. Perfect. There
Yeah,
you go.
exactly.
No, one goblin is too much. But
Yeah,
it
the lethality between any D&D system and any Warhammer is just night and day. I remember when
high
I
fantasy to
started
low
the
fantasy. Yeah,
sorry?
high fantasy to low fantasy, and everything has a cost in Warhammer. Like
Yeah.
you don't have the wizard just being like, oh, well, let me cast fireball, and the cleric being like, by the lights above, let me raise you from the dead. No, 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 no.
No, 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 no.
Like
Magic is
the
terrifying.
yeah, the smallest spell has a cost. If you decide not to sleep that night because you want to keep watch, that has a cost. And I guess fifth edition does it with exhaustion, but I'm not a fan of how exhaustion works, but that's not for today.
Yeah, we could rant on that on another time because exhaustion does have its flaws. I actually I had Macbeth join the campaign I'm currently running, and I had to remind him because he wanted to stay up all night. And I said, you know, you're gonna get a point of exhaustion if you don't take a long rest.
And the first point is so debilitating that like
I
nobody's
know.
willing to do it, right? Like if yeah, no, and if they
One
just
to
give
three
it
is
one in between,
fine. Like
yeah.
once you're at like two and three, it's like okay, fine. Like yeah, your speed gets halved, I think at three if I remember correctly, but
But I mean,
it's
depending on the character, that doesn't matter. And
it's so hard to get rid of too. And then if you look at
yes,
barbarians who can just get it whenever they decide to frenzy.
no, yeah, and again, one for another time, but I've been working on it's like a 10-year project. I'm about a year into it. I'm making I call it Nova RPG, and it's taking
Mm.
my favorite parts of Pathfinder 3.5, 5th edition, and Warhammer, and whatever else people send my way, and making a homebrew on it to kind of have a fun system. But there's a lot of really fun things from D&D, but exhaustion is not one of them.
Yeah, yeah, exhaustion is it's interesting. I like the idea that if you just stay up for 6 days, you die.
Yes. Which I mean, like, it's kind of fair. Like, a lot of systems won't recognize that at all, right? They're just like, yeah, I guess you're just superhuman. Like, cool, you can stay up forever.
Yeah.
But it is a lot. But yeah,
Han, there was something I wanted to touch on, and I think it was just the difference in systems between Warhammer and D&D. And when I started this current campaign that I'm doing, I did ask the party, "Hey, do you guys want to be really cool heroes or do you want to feel like you're only okay?" And I realized in hindsight, if I pitch it that way, no one's gonna pick Warhammer.
no, I the way I like to put it is and this is going to sidetrack a little bit from tabletop, but
That's
were
okay.
you there at Dagger Deep for the Night of the Living Dead arc or whatever it is, or Death Walks Among Us or whatever?
I think
Um,
I only went to Dagger Deep once, and it was when the festival was happening.
oh yeah, so they had this time where normally for the listeners, Dagger Deep is a high action role play. It's a lot like a LARP live action role play, but we're allowed to punch and tackle and grapple and all that. It's a little more full contact. It's a lot of fun, but think D&D and Skyrim and an improv group. So you're running around the forest and acting it out, and instead of rolling dice, you just have to do the thing. Um,
Yeah.
it's very high fantasy, kind of like D&D there, where people cast spells and you only have so much mana, but you can meditate to regenerate it, and there's no real cost. Like if you get dropped down, a healer heals you and you're back up and you can run back into the fray. And that's again is like when people are spending their Saturday running around the woods dressed up head to toe in a cape with fake elf ears, they want to do a power fantasy. They want to feel more powerful than they are in real life. But we
Yeah.
did this one arc near Halloween. It culminated on Halloween, which was so awesome. But it was every time you dropped your magic, your magic, every time you dropped down to 0 hit points, your maximum hit points was reduced by 1. And for a lot of us, you only start with 3 hit points. And like for all the casters, they had maybe maximum 5, even if they're high level. And the fighters, the really powerful ones, they had maybe maximum 8 or 10. So like I'm there, I'm brand new. This is my first season out there with them and everything. And I've been dropped twice. And we still have 3 sessions before the end of the story arc. So like in character, I don't know how long the arc's going and all that, right? So even on the last day, like I was playing it very, very shifty because like if I die, I'm gone forever. There's no resurrections, there's no healing back. You're gone.
Right. Death is permanent there.
Yeah. And like normally it's not as permanent, right? Like there's means to bring people back. But this was around the time with essentially the arc was, hey, Death Incarnate's pissed off as you guys keep on resurrecting people willy-nilly and you're messing with the order of things. So we need to show you that there's a price to be paid. And they've changed the rules now because of that arc. You can still resurrect people, but it costs people like people have to sacrifice their own maximum hit points to bring you back. It's a whole thing. But it was that arc is what I picture Warhammer as, where if you get dropped down, there's a solid chance that your injury is so debilitating that even if you survive it, you're not an adventurer anymore. You're lucky to go home and still be able to work your job as a chef or a bartender or the guy who shovels manure out of the stables. Like it's intense. And I think if you have a DM who's willing to work with you a bit for when you really don't want your character to be gone, and I think like I don't believe in pulling the punches, but I believe in giving a narrative response for overcoming the outcome. So like with Magdalene getting shot out of the tree and falling down and losing her eye and everything, like that was the role. That's what was going to happen. Sure, I could have rolled it behind the screen and fudged what it was, but I feel like that would have deflated the situation there, right? This is with their taste of how bloody this campaign was going to be. Instead, though, working with MacBeth on the backside of it too. Hey, so like rules as written, this happens. We could either aggravate that enough so that she has an excuse to retire, or we can either work with it so that you have a way to, you're still going to have this disability, but you're going to be able to still be a functioning hero, right? And bless his heart, he wanted the cool role play opportunity, and I think in the end, Admiral Magdalene with the eye patch is freaking iconic, and I think it worked out really, really well. But it's that's where I see the difference between the two, where it's kind of like that old saying or not old saying, but that kind of meme of like dogs are for people who want to be worshipped, and cats are for people who are okay with a god staring them in the eyes at 3 a.m. while it sits on their chest. Warhammer is the cat owner, and D&D is the dog owner. Where if you want to be the Avengers running around saving the world and being better than everyone, well then you go D&D. If you want to be an average person succeeding despite the odds, then you go Warhammer. And there's no wrong answer there, right? And even like I like to go back and forth, but just with how much if you're going to do Warhammer, I think you can't flinch. If something bad happens, you can try to overcome it, but don't hand wave the bad thing away just because it's bad. Because otherwise, why are you playing Warhammer?
And that's in my view, because Warhammer was my first introduction to RPGs. I didn't start with D&D. I started with second edition Warhammer, which
so dark. I can't even imagine.
So I know, it's just compared to starting with D&D, like, oh yeah, I get to be this really fun hero. It's like, no, you start off a slave. You have to earn your right to be a human again.
Yeah, you were a halfling slave. I was Orlinde, the holy hero of good that looked after the halflings and the small folk in D&D. You were literally a halfling slave. in Warhammer as your first character. I can't
I
even.
was rescued from being sacrificed for cultists, which has given me trauma in my campaigns, I realize, because in every long running campaign, my big bad guy is always some cultist group. And
Yes,
I realized talking with MacBeth, oh, this is why. It's because when I was 16, you decided to traumatize me this way.
poor memory. No, my
Yeah.
whenever I run, and I won't get too far into this, but it's a little off topic. But whenever I run
That's fine.
Warhammer campaigns, they're far and few between. Um, and my NPCs are typically our old party members. So like
Yes,
Eddie's
MacBeth does
daughter,
this too.
Eddie's daughter has shown up a few times.
Ah,
Magdalene is in all of them. Brandy is Azatine is Karl is a little too powerful to throw against my players. So I send out his lieutenants like Azatine and Esteban. And
yeah.
and again, like look, if the play those players ever wanted to play their characters again, look, this is just my interpretation in one of the multiverses of like, multiverse 32 5B or whatever. Oh, this is what's
Right,
happened.
yeah.
Like in a different world, maybe Esteban and Brandy and Eddie all teamed up and killed Karl. There you go. Like that's a different universe. Cool. But I developed things off of there, and I get a lot of joy out of that because it feels like almost like I'm role playing still. But at the same time, anytime like the new players are just like, oh man, these characters seem so nuanced and so well versed, and like, holy crap, Brandy is the most charming person on the freaking planet. How is he evil? And then whenever I'm lucky enough to have the original crew back together, they notice something.
If
They're like, yeah, and they're like, oh wait, what? Wait, sorry, you described them as what? They were carrying what kind of knife? And of course their character doesn't know what that means, but you can see in the player's eyes, they're like, oh my gosh, 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 oh my gosh.
yeah.
And it's a really fun moment. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if MacBeth ever shared this with you. I feel like he probably did, but in the last campaign he ran, he had us encounter Child Karl.
You were in that campaign. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
is him and one of our other friends, we hop online once every once in a while. So he'd be like,
Yeah.
"Hey guys, what do I torment my party members with this time?" And so he asked me a little bit. He's like, "Hey, so obviously this isn't going to be perfect to your interpretation, but like I just want to make sure I'm kind of like on point for this. I want to give a good representation." And I'm like Beth, it warms my heart that you understood my character well enough, and I knew he understood my character well enough because
You
he
guys
knew
had
how to.
lots of one-on-one time too.
Well, yeah. Oh, he knew how to torment me in the campaign, not through like mechanics, but by making a role playing situation that cut to the core that was there with Karl that I didn't even realize was there. Like moments where Karl's old best friend comes out and is like, "If you ever love someone like I loved her, I'm going to find them, I'm going to flay them, and they're going to die screaming your name." And I'm like, you read my backstory because Karl does have like loved ones back up home. Like this scares the living hell out of him, and he's what goes bump in the night. And moments like that where it's you can tell he really took the time to be able to work out what made the character tick. And I from what I've heard about that session, it sounds like he did a very good job of it.
Oh, it was great. Like, because obviously I played in the original campaign with Karl, and then this campaign that he did for 2 years. Which honestly, if I'm judging both of them, obviously he was a different person later in life when he did this newer campaign. I think it was 5 times better, and that's saying a lot because that original campaign was so
was
good.
It was
But
gold, but I think also like if he took everything that was good from the original and added his developed skills since then, I could only imagine like the sky's the limit. Buddy weaves narratives like no one else I know, and like
oh yeah,
there's amazing DMs for all these different reasons, but he is a storyteller, and it's glorious.
and he did something that I always try and do because I find it makes a campaign much more concrete and feel well connected. He had a custom drawn map because it all took place north of the main continent in Warhammer. So there wasn't like callbacks to all these other places that we've been. He made new cities that I don't think are actually in the lore. I
I'm
haven't
so
checked, but I'm pretty sure
envious.
he made it all up. And then we went to the north. So we went to where Karl was from, and we were in this remote, desolate tundra, basically trudging through snow. First combat that we get up there. This is near the end of the campaign. This is like in the last 6 months, I think, before we ended it. And first combat we get into up there, one of our characters has a critical hit and breaks his leg. So we go back to a base camp that we were at earlier, fashion a sled so that he can just slide along with a broken leg while we continue in what I think was supposed to be a 2 week journey farther into the north.
Oh
And
my
basically,
gosh.
like, there was 5 or 6 sessions where it was, all right, you go outside, endurance checks to not die from exposure. We're all getting -10 to all of our stats. We're going through, we're trying to build these like bungalows in the snow and all these sorts of
Oh my
shelters so that we
gosh.
can get like heat. And we stumble upon this cabin. And I think what happens is we encounter Karl, and I'm going to butcher this, and MacBeth can correct me because he's writing a book literally about this campaign. But
And
I
I
believe,
haven't read all of it yet, but it's been kind of glory. Or I haven't read that one yet, but he's been writing on the original one too, and
oh, he's been writing on the original one too.
it's really nice to hear you know, some creative licenses, but very much based on the true story. Air quotes for
Yeah.
the people who can't see.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
no,
that
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this sounds freaking amazing. If I'm turning green, it's just the envy.
Yeah. Well, so to finish it off, basically we meet this kid and it's Karl and he's telling us okay, I'm gonna get this wrong, but basically we had to kill this other kid and his dad. And I guess it was because they were told something from Karl about how they were a bad person or whatever, and they had wronged him or something. So we did it. And we killed the kid and his dad in this tiny ass cabins, like maybe 10 by 10 feet. Small cabin in the middle of the north. And then the party looks at one another and we're like, well, we've just spent 5 days trudging through the snow and freezing our asses off. There's a wood fireplace in here. Sure, there's blood all over the floor and two corpses. What do we do? And my character was the goodest character. I know it's not a real word, but my character was the
Yeah,
goodest character.
look, he was gooder than everyone else. He was the goodest boy.
I was the person saying that we shouldn't sleep in the area where we killed all these people. And then everyone was being pragmatic about it, be like, look, but if we go outside, we're gonna freeze. I'm like, okay, but this is so wrong that we just came in here, killed these people, and now we're gonna sleep at their house. It's like, all right, what if we take them outside? I'm like, well, obviously we're gonna take them outside if we sleep in the house.
And even more so if any of your characters had been well versed into the terrain you guys were marching into, just like the latent psychic energies of the north and everything, I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to stay around anywhere that murder had happened. No way. Are you kidding? I'd
No, we
rather
were
freeze
all
to death.
so
Yeah.
naive about that. Yeah. No, the fun thing about this campaign, Karl, was that we played 2 years. I had 5 characters. Not a single party member ever played a magic caster because of the superstitious fear I invoked into everyone saying, look, we are not fucking around with magic. We're not doing that today. We're gonna
Oh, I
die.
love
People are
that.
gonna people are gonna get killed if we use magic.
And you know what?
It was sorry,
Even if
go
you
ahead.
have a responsible caster, and like the in Wurtbad, Eddie was there for Wurtbad, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, where like, oh yeah, no, this guy's a little Looney Tunes, but he's a good guy. He's a responsible caster. He's board certified. He's got his
yeah.
certificate. And Workbad gets blown off the map is rules as written. If you mess up your spell bad enough, you miscast.
Yeah.
Like there's all these things like, okay, maybe you take a little bit of damage, maybe, you know, people around you get hurt, maybe all the food spoils within a mile, like, okay, well, woohoo, funny. Or maybe you summon a demon, and you know what demons get to do? Summon other demons.
They cascade that way. It's really fun.
Yeah. So it's like yeah, no, I think that's a very fair line to draw in the sand with, look, you can play a caster if you want, but in which case you better play it like I played Karl, where people don't know you're a caster until you save their life, and then they're like, look, I hate what you are, but I love that you just saved my life, so I'm willing to tolerate you. I don't have to like you, but I'm willing to tolerate you. You're more useful than you are deadly for now. And
Yeah.
I think that's the best you can ask for a caster in Warhammer.
And I think it's a little bit late because we've been talking about Magic and Warhammer for a while, but just to iterate for people who aren't familiar, Warhammer is very volatile for casters. There's a big penalty you pay for having the privilege of casting, and that is miscasting, which doesn't exist in D&D. You either successfully cast your spell or it doesn't get cast, but in Warhammer, if you screw up casting your spell, you can screw up big time and potentially even just die or kill people.
And
Or
the
it could be something
miscasting,
mundane.
oh yeah, and the miscasting scales is like I'm probably gonna mess up. His fourth edition has changed, but it's pretty
It's
similar, I
it's
think.
fine.
But
It's fine.
if you roll under the value that you're trying to score to cast a spell, well, that's technically not a miscast. When I was running it, I misinterpreted that as a miscast, and I still run it that way because magic is volatile. Life sucks. Not that I give my characters a lot of leeway, or let my players a lot of leeway in making powerful characters, because that way when I make the world have costs and expenses, and like you have to pay to do things, whether it's in blood, sweat, or tears.
Hmm.
Well, at least they have powerful characters that can kind of overcome it. I don't feel quite as bad. I do that in D&D and all that. But if you even if you roll enough dice and you get high enough and you cast above the spell casting value, if you roll doubles, I think in the second edition, it's if you roll doubles of ones or sixes or something like that. Sixes, you overload the spell and you cast it, but you get a miscast. And ones, it doesn't matter if you got above the value, you still miscast it and it doesn't go off. But if you roll
Right.
doubles, okay, well that's on the first value table. If you roll triples, that's on the second value table. If you roll quadruples, that's when like society is crumbling and you just flatten the city.
Oh
and
gosh.
it's so that way it's a really good way of making the cost or the danger, the risk escalate as you get more powerful, because otherwise, like, I'm the most powerful wizard in all the land, I don't care if I miscast. Well, actually no, if you miscast, things are just worse. And it's I freaking love it. I know it's not for everybody, but I absolutely love that mechanic.
We had a brief interruption in the recording here, so sorry about that, but let's please resume the conversation we were having with Karl. I don't know, there's just a lot of things that I also wanted to talk about. So
Dude, I am having so much, I can't even express it. So much fun. Like I let's do this regularly. I am as many times as you will have me back on the Eddie Proudfoot podcast, the the EPFP, if you will. And I will happily come back. This is a this is honestly, I'm on reading week right now of my last year of academia. Fingers crossed, as long as I don't fail.
You won't fail.
And
You'll be fine.
yeah, no, I'm too good to fail. Look at me. I'm Karl mother frickin' Azantine. Yeah. This is the most fun I've had all reading week.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad it could have happened. I was happy to hear about it, especially the stuff at the beginning. I didn't realize how young you were when you started role playing. So that's
Yeah.
really cool. I'm so
Well,
jealous.
I moved to the island when I was 8, right?
Yeah.
And Brandy was one of my first friends there, and I guess his family's been playing since like, gosh, I did since since
Okay.
since his dad was when the age that I joined, right? Like since D&D first came out, his dad has been playing.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's
Um,
like the mid 70s or something like that, I think.
yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, look, I'm not an OG. I'm a mid
Yeah.
G, and
Yeah.
and so yeah, no, he it was honestly just this one thing. I can't fully picture it, but I can remember standing on the playground. I remember where we are at the school, the elementary school there. I could point to it if we were back there. And he's just like, "Hey, so have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons?" I'm like, "No, I'm sorry. What is that?" In my old school, I played soccer.
Yeah.
Is it anything like that? He's like, "No." And like I hadn't
Is
even
it
played
anything
like
like soccer?
my experience with video games and stuff at that point was like we had Super Mario Brothers,
Yeah.
the World 3. That was Super Mario World 3, and that was like that was it. My parents didn't really let gaming and all that. That wasn't really a thing. We had my dad's old game system, and I was not good at it. And I'm like, well, you're like one of my only friends here. Whatever you're into, like, let's go check it out. Let's give it a go. And that started a crippling lifelong addiction to nerdism.
Yeah.
Honestly, if that hadn't happened, I would have obsessed over something else. I might have been cool through grade school. Oh, shudder the thought. No, thank you.
Yeah, I can't imagine you as one of the cool kids.
I would have peaked in high school, I think, and that would have been sad.
Yeah.
But
But
instead,
now 20 plus years later, you're still playing RPGs.
well, I'm looking over there, and my Chaos Demons army is almost completely painted. I've got a couple heroes I got to paint still, but I have them in the background. Is our British friend, her Chilean fiance, is playing a last. It's been a while since we played, but he loves playing D&D. he hates making characters because it's a time investment thing. You spend so long making a character, and then because he's only played in campaigns or sessions that go like maybe 3 sessions, he
Oh,
feels like he loses
really?
it. It's just situationally, right? He
Oh,
started playing after we had all dispersed.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
so like I think we got about 6 sessions in with this character, and it's a sangromancer, so like a blood wizard or a blood sorcerer turtle. So I found a turtle model that is damn near exactly how he described it, and I've been painting it up. But he's also
Oh
like
my
red
gosh.
green colorblind, so I'm trying to do a sangromancer turtle without using too much red because the red will look like the green from the turtle. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
we're getting creative. I think it's gonna turn out pretty well. But his birthday's coming up in March, so I'll be mailing that back to him to be like,
Oh,
hey,
nice.
don't forget this. Once I graduate, we can start playing online a bit more. And if you've got time, hey, I'm gonna be accommodating the BC time schedule anyways. So it's oh, did I just dox you? Do your viewers know
No,
what
that's
province?
fine. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
in
No, that's awesome.
in
I'd be down to play any campaign UDM ever, even if it
oh,
was very inconvenient time zones. Even if
yeah,
you said
yeah.
we're starting at 8 a.m. my time, I'd be like, all right, that's 4 in the morning. Guess I'm getting up.
No, I'm here for it. I am 100% here for it. And like I understand it's a 4 hour time change and all that, which is freaking killer. But I don't know. I'm all about them genuine connections, and I'd love to recoup with everybody here. Plus,
No,
the thing that I'm running is going to be very open to drop in, drop out. If you, it's the type of planner I am. I'm not the one who can, and as much as MacBeth would attest, I did not use the campaign, math to be like, how many goblins do you throw against a player? My style is very much more of I know my world better than everyone. So when my players decide to go 30 miles that way and totally ignore the quest, I know what's going to happen at least, or I know what could happen.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I like to say I've gotten a bit better than that goblin camp, but it's look, you'll end up in over your head sometimes, but I think that's also just the real world where not everything is at your level. Um,
Yeah.
ancient red dragons don't fail to exist just because you're third level. Now,
And it's
I
it's a
I
great
would,
way of having that sandbox and then also being able to guide the party of like, hey, you're in the wrong area right now. I'm
and
not
I
going to
just
stop you from going here, but you're going to
yeah,
figure it out.
and I think I've gotten a lot better with giving warning signs and then also giving multiple avenues of escape. But honestly, that's why I love playing with new players. As a player, even more, I love playing with new players because I'm in a campaign right now where that's where Doc Hops is playing
Mm-hmm.
rabbit folk doctor, and like most of the all except for one of them have been playing for like less than 6 months. Um, and we just started this campaign. So some of them, this is their second campaign. It's overlapping, but like they're
Yeah.
still very, very green. But just some of the things they think of doing, it's like a veteran player wouldn't conceptualize it that way. Um, it's the unbridled creativity, and I love it so much because it's something that I've tried to hold on to really well. But in the end, like even against your best wishes, eventually you're like, well, the strategic thing to do is to never split the party and you put the fighters in the front and you don't put the squishiest character in the back because what if you get ambushed? No, we're not dealing with any of that. The druid's like, I actually want to walk 60 feet off the trail and walk beside us. Look, if the druid wants to do that, that's great. Like that's like you might get ambushed and eaten. I don't know, but um, and it's a
They'll just
little
they'll just wild shape into a bug and hide.
like little strategic things that quote unquote veteran gamers would be like, oh, well, that's it's kind of like the difference between having a flavorful versus an optimized character, but it's in the
Mm-hmm.
actions you take, and it's
Yes.
I love it. Some of the really creative, just what would have been a very mundane encounter, and they're like, oh, I want to try doing this, and I'm sitting there like, why the heck did I
Yeah.
not think about that? That's awesome. Like I
No, I
wish.
it's so funny what you think is obvious and the players don't do, and then what you would never consider that your players actually end up doing. And it's for
Yes.
that reason I never plan out a session. I just plan out a world and then I let them do things because if I plan something out, it's not going to happen, and that's a rule. That's a
And
hard
look,
rule.
I'll create villain. I'm right up there with you. I'll create villains and stuff like that, and be like, look, they're gonna do X, Y, and Z, whether or not the players interact with them. So the world will develop,
Yeah.
but the players don't have to. don't have to engage with them at all. They can go 3 continents to the left. I may not know what exists there, but I know what exists next to there, so I can kind of build off of that. And it's I love it. I love it so much. And then I feel also like I'm not. I don't want to say that people who pre-plan a session are railroading, because I don't want to be misinterpreted as that.
No.
No. But I like having a purely open sandbox. It's, if you want to disregard everything I had planned for the session, go right ahead. I mean, the village that you're in right now may suffer because like the Illithids are going to eat brains whether or not you try to stop them. But
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. No, I think I don't have the talent to be on the other side of it. Like I feel like MacBeth with his interwoven plot lines and stuff like that, he's very much on the other side of it. But that we can save that for a conversation with him, because I'd love to hear his mind on it.
Yeah, we'll give him a chance to defend himself, but since he's not here, I'll defend him right now, which is, I know in the last campaign he did that I played in for 2 years, which actually you were there for the precursor session to that, because that one shot he ran, that was what he turned into the campaign.
With
and
my
then
with my duelist and
yeah, the one that was like on the top deck fighting all those pirates, and you were just
oh
keep hitting, so you kept stacking advantage. And that, I think, was your first time playing 4th edition, as was mine. And we
yeah,
were just discovering the advantage system that they put in, and you were able to hit
gosh,
so hard if you didn't screw up.
it was glorious. Oh my gosh, I had so much fun with that. And I don't know his name because again I played it for like just that one session there, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it was so much fun. And it was also like the only character I'd played in Warhammer before that was Karl. I had never
Yeah.
played anyone. So it was really fun to play. I guess almost closer to an Esteban, but it was a melee instead of a ranger type thing, instead of a bow.
Yeah.
I based him largely off of and I'm going to butcher the name, and I'm really sorry to any big fans here. The Princess Bride. I mean, Ignacio Montoya or whatever. I'm
Oh,
looking
I
for
don't know.
the six-fingered man.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You killed my father. Prepare to die. And
Yeah.
I wanted the dashing swordsman type thing, right? And
Yeah.
oh gosh, that was a great session. I didn't realize that you guys had built off of that one. That's
So me and the player that played the character Gage, we took our characters into the main campaign, and then my character died because she was a yuppie, privileged 17-year-old girl who was like really hell-bent on proving herself. I think I described her as Buffy, but had more of an ego.
Buffy
Eh,
without the superpowers.
Buffy, well, she was a vampire hunter, so not quite a slayer, but pretty damn
Right? Yeah.
close. Yeah. But what I'll say about Riley in his defense for that campaign, I think he did a really good job at not planning out encounters that he expected us to do, but rather just big world events that if we
Yeah.
were there for, we would be able to prevent. But there was one that I'll let him describe in more detail, but basically it was called the Blackening. And we were at this one town in the north part of the island called Sealfjord, and we were trying to get it prepared for this blackening. We didn't know what it was. None of us are magic users. It just sounded ominous and bad. So we spent 3 days fortifying the town, digging trenches, making sure it was ready for whatever was going to approach it. The day comes, we see this awful darkness over in the south, but nothing happens. And we're like, great, we successfully defeated the blackening. Meanwhile, we go back weeks later to the south town of Alstenburg, and we find that it's been completely decimated. We were in the wrong spot, and we did not know it, and we didn't find out for a long time.
I love that so much. Actually, I would
People
like
were
to
mad at us too.
I would like to be a little more nuanced with my approach here, because I would say there's probably three styles, and you can overlap between them. Picture it a mix between a Venn diagram and a triangle.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
you've got the plot weavers, and that's where MacBeth is, where he's planning narratives, but he's not planning crunch.
Yeah.
Then you've got the crunch calculators. These are the ones that are like, well, in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, with a party of this size at this level, if you can have this many CR creatures, it is a deadly encounter. And I have mad respect for the people that have the time and energy to do that. That is so not me. I feel closer to MacBeth than I do to that system. And I've had amazing DMs who do that. My current DM is very much that, and it's awesome. I love them for it. It's so not me.
Well,
and then
also,
I think you have the world builders, which are us, where it's like you're less planning a plot or a narrative, but you're more creating a setting. And that's where I think I thrive.
Well, also, I don't know so much for you, but I know for me, I really rely on doing improv in my sessions. Like if I try and plan out stuff, it's never as good as if I just do it live and come up with it off the top of my head. And I find that makes for really fun interactions. And not to crap on the calculating combat people, but I have sat through and calculated combats in fifth edition that were meant to be deadly, that were super easy and barely an inconvenience for the party. And I've done it the other way too, where they're supposed
Fairly
to be
inconvenience.
barely an inconvenience. And then I've done it the other way too, where it's like supposed to be just an easy walk in the park and half the characters are downed and unconscious. And I'm sitting there thinking, what the heck happened?
But
This was supposed to be the easy
this
one.
the CR system is so freaking broken, and it's like, look,
It doesn't work.
shadows are what, like a CR one half or something like that. They drain strength. That's neither here nor there. Like that's me putting probably a little too much detail onto the issue there, but
Yeah.
no, like it can be done very well, especially if you have enough experience that you know not to trust the calculation at times.
Yes.
But
Yes.
he'll be my current DM's the type where it's like, oh no, the NPC, like there's three NPCs you can run into that'll give you to the quest giver. They're this guy with this background and this name, this guy with this background and this name, and this gal with this background and name. I'm like, no, look, wherever you go, I'm gonna make up an NPC that can send you to whatever a quest is, right?
Oh
And I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
I don't know. You can kind of tailor it to the vibe that the players are going. If they want like a investigative noir type vibe, well, I'm going to give them a confidential informant. If they're some murder hobos wanting to run through and bathe it in blood, bathe everyone in blood, you know what? It's probably going to be a squeaky voiced kobold or goblin that they can take on as their sidekick for a little while before they inevitably get betrayed and stabbed in the kidney. Because I don't let my players have nice things without a cost.
That's I feel exactly the same way. Every NPC I give them that's good is going to betray them or they don't trust and end up killing. So,
Yes, and like you give them just enough good ones that like they feel bad when they just start murdering them indiscriminately. Because if you have them all murder, then
yeah.
eventually you can't have fun anymore. But
Well,
if you
and my
start giving
favorite,
them,
sorry, go ahead.
no, go right ahead, go right ahead.
I was gonna say my favorite is to give them someone who has a very unlikable personality but is good. So
Yes,
because then they want them to be evil, but they're actually the good guys. They're just not very likable, and
I love that
it messes
so
with the
much.
players so much.
That's actually that tying that back into the theme of player characters. That's kind of how I went with Doc Hops here, because I'm very used to, as an experienced player, strategizing for the team or giving advice or
Hmm.
taking a lead in social encounters because
Right.
I'm comfortable with it, right?
Hmm.
But we had so many new players. We have six players in this one, and four of them this is oh sorry, three of them this is their first campaign. Two of them have only been playing for a few months, and then there's me. Um, and so I'm like, I want them to take the lead. I don't want to take the spot. This isn't going to be Mal all over again, right? And so that's why with Doc Hops, look, I'm really good at what I do. I can patch you up. I can dodge stuff. I'm going to hop around like the little rabbit I am and bring my sewing kit. Don't worry, my specialty is in animals. I'm technically a veterinarian, but it's translatable skills. But my intelligence and my charisma are 8. So I'm a freaking doorknob. And like
Yeah.
I've got the cutting edge of wit of a spoon. So like when we're there trying to talk our way through a situation, if the rest of the party is like done doing their stuff and all that, so it eventually gets to the point where I cut in, I'm not doing it in a nuanced, hey guys, here I am to save the day, being the experienced player. I'm doing it like a freaking a-hole. Like I'm not a nice guy. And it causes some internal friction with the other characters, but the players know what I'm doing at this point. I've been very open with it.
That's
So
good.
we've been having fun with it where they're like, hops in. What the hell? Like you can't just be doing that all the time. Look, the sure, I'm willing to say I did that wrong, but the only person who got hurt was me. So I feel like you're making a bigger deal out of it than anything. If you'd gotten hurt, I might have felt bad, but I'm the one with singed fur. I'm the one with some third degree burns that I'm about to go and deal with right now. So you all need to step off right now. And then out of character, I'll be like, okay, guys, as a player, I did not see that going that bad. Um, Doc Hops, he's a little defensive. He's not gonna, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's and I again because I'm so a lot of my characters either have a high intelligence or a high charisma, frequently both. And I made the purposeful choice this time just to be like, well, if I back down in both of those, first of all, I'm not the one who knows everything with all these knowledge checks in the DM's home world and all homebrewed world and all that. And I'm not the one that's going to be leading the social encounters. So I'm going to do my thing really good. I'm going to still get to interact with people. I'm still going to role play, but I'm not going to role play with like as the suave, or I'm not Sherlock Holmes noticing all the tricks before everyone. If we're in puzzles, if it gets to the point where I'm solving it, it's because the DM's getting frustrated that nobody's worked it out yet. Um, and it's I kind of just bring him in as a or he'll say something out loud where it's like, man, if only we could do this. And then all of a sudden the paladin's eyes light up and he's like, Doc Hops, you freaking genius, you. And then he worked
You've
out
done it again.
And it gives them the opportunity to get to fully immerse, and it gives them room to not be fully optimized. Because otherwise I feel like, especially if like my last character was a blade singer with an 19 intelligence. I was going on to 20 at the next level. It was going to be glorious. But it also meant anytime we ran into anything, I'm like, oh, well, I'll roll my knowledge check. I know it. Or I'm sitting here looking at the situation and our barbarian wants to run in and smash stuff. I'm like, whoa, 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 big guy. I appreciate you're really good at turning things into a fine red mist, chunky salsa rule and all that. But why don't we do this? And I was playing with some more experienced players at the time, so I didn't feel bad stepping on that because they were also comfortable enough to be like, hey, no, like I appreciate that's probably a smart move, but screw you, we're not listening to you. You're not my mom, you're not my supervisor. You're the wizard with the rapier that stands beside me and sings a song and stabs people. Cool, nice. But with all the new players, I feel like it's a good opportunity for quote unquote vets to kind of step back a little bit. And you can still have a lot of role play fun without taking charge and being the ipso facto leader of the team. And
yeah, because especially with new players, you want them to have those experiences that make them want to come back to the game. And if they feel like they're getting crowded out by the more experienced players, then they can feel like, exactly. Oh, I don't know if D&D is for me.
And plus they get to say like 100% on that, but also like part of what I love to play with new players is they do the weird things that I never would have expected. And if I'm sitting there being like, well, actually, we shouldn't split the party because statistically now we have 2 half-size parties and now we're vulnerable. Well, no, let's let them learn the rules of Dungeons and Dragons the hard way, the unofficial rules.
Never split the party.
Yeah, no, sure. Let's sleep out here in the middle of the night. Let's not set a guard tonight. Sure, let's do that. And it's always a fun opportunity, and they're like they learn pretty quick, right? Like Doc Hops always volunteers to take the first watch because once he goes to sleep, he doesn't want to get up again until sunrise. I'm the only party member without dark vision. Like we're sitting at night and I'm sitting there like I can't see a thing, but that's okay. And it doesn't bother me because I don't think in dark vision, right? My guy's never had it. He's always had to deal with his other senses.
This is what watch is like at night. It's just dark.
Exactly. But like 3 nights into us being in this jungle, all of a sudden the other rogue, our actual DPS rogue, which is kind of fun that we have 2. We've got me that's patching people up and her that's tearing them apart. She's like, no, Doc Ops, you don't get to be like, get a full night's sleep. And I'm like, whoa. Gee, what are you doing here? You can't tell me, like, you don't get to tell me what to do. We're a democracy here. You're not in charge. You're like, no. And she handled it so well. And I didn't even see this coming. She's like, no, like, we're going to have a big day tomorrow. We need you well rested so you can patch us all up. And I'm like, you just played to my doctor's ego. You like that was a prime moment. And now like my character is bonded more with hers. And I'm like, you respect my expertise, I respect yours. So even though we're both rogues, anytime it's actually like a sneaky stabby, like trap disarming thing, I'm like, oh, I could try to do it, but that's their forte. Let's let them take it on. Because it's we've made this mutual respect moment and it's kind of fun. But it's it's I don't know. Again, in the end, do what you want as long as everyone's having fun with it. But I think there's just some fun opportunities, especially when you're with new players, to have a fun character that you love playing, but that also I'm playing a support character without playing the typical I'm the bard, I will heal you. I'm the rabbit that's muttering under his breath, swearing as he's trying to patch you up while the Goliath is turning somebody into chunky salsa. And
it's such a fun and different idea too. I really like that, and
it's a lot of fun.
It's interesting what you said about like building that rapport with the other character, because I find what makes D&D most memorable is when you have those moments in your character with other
Yes.
characters, because then you actually feel a reason to stay together, like we were talking about earlier, where if you don't have that, it kind of just feels like, what's the point in your character being with all these other people?
Well, I feel like it back in MacBeth's campaign there, like sure, Karl and Eddie got along, right? Like that was fine. But it was when we were in the rowboat trying to come through from Hartshorn Lodge back to the mainland
Yeah.
in Marienburg, and the ship cap or our boat capsizes. And like, look, I'm a big buff northerner, but I'm not trained in swimming, so my 42 strength is halved. You had a
Yeah.
16 strength or something like that, and that's halved because you're not trained in
Yeah.
swimming either. We're
Yeah.
both equally helpless, and it's this weird power dynamic where like sure the 6'4" barbarian dark wizard or whatever typically would have like they're perceived as the more powerful of the two, and like if they were just standing on dry land, we're both equally as helpless to the waves. And I feel
Yeah.
like that it was a trauma bond where we get to the mainland and like sure we're still friends with the rest of the crew, but they weren't there. They don't get it. They didn't breathe in so much salt water that they got pneumonia. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't the same thing. And I think that kind of set off that I think was really what bonded the two characters there. And that
For
was
sure.
exactly what you were saying there. Though it was a as much as we were friends outside of the game and our characters inside of the game got along, that was the
Yeah.
moment where I think Eddie became a ride or die for Karl, where Karl would have been like, oh yeah, I'll cut off my freaking hand for that man. He's that half man is more of a man than you will ever be, random opponent of ours. And of course is Karl had a high fellowship, but he was also, let's just say, not always politically correct. He called Eddie a half man a lot, but it came from here.
There was
His
a lot
left
of
hand.
halfling jokes at Eddie's expense in that campaign.
Like I'd say it came from his heart, but I'm not sure he had one. So it came from his left lung and
It came from his third stomach.
third stomach, right next to the spleen.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I don't know if we would ever be able to properly end this, but that feels like a good a spot as any. So thank you for talking to me today, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations about D&D and RPG shenanigans in the future.
Gosh, by all the gods, dark and holy, I sure hope so, because this was so much fun, and I could ramble on about this for another 8 hours before I need a rest. This was truly amazing. Thank you, Eddie Proudfoot, and I hope to be back on your podcast sooner rather than later.
Let's make it happen. Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of the Eddie Proudfoot podcast. If you enjoyed it, please follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or Twitter. And as always, may the gods have mercy on your soul.